Hey, what's up YouTube? You're watching Ready Set Drone, and today I want to tell you about one of the drones I've been flying a lot recently, the Mavic Air 2, so stay tuned. So the Mavic Air 2 has been out for a little while now, and I've had a chance to fly it quite a bit over the last few weeks and months, and I have to say, it's really a different experience flying this thing than it is flying the Mavic Mini, as well as the Mavic 2. The Mavic Air 2 is right in that spot between the two as far as its performance and its abilities. So I want to go through those things with you. So first of all, the Mavic Air 2 benefits from being the most recent release from DJI. And what I mean by that is this drone has the most recent tech on it. It's built on all of the success they've had with the Mavic Mini, the original Mavic Air, the Mavic Pro, and the Mavic 2 series. It's got the best of all those things in it, with a few exceptions where they've let some stuff off because of the price point. But ultimately, what you're dealing with here is the latest tech in terms of its ability to transmit for a long distance, getting a very clear picture, its ability to stabilize itself, its ability to avoid obstacles, and a whole bunch of other things that we'll go through now. Now, one of the things that really sets the Mavic Air 2 apart is flight time. For an overall flight time of 25 to 30 minutes in most conditions, that's pretty incredible. And that means a couple of things. You don't have to have as many batteries or take as many batteries with you in order to get some really awesome footage, meaning that you can take this with 2 or 3 batteries and still get an hour to an hour and a half of flight time, and that gives you plenty of opportunity to get really great footage. Whereas with older drones, you might have had to have 5 or 6 batteries in order to accomplish the same thing. Now, it's also very lightweight and compact. Not as lightweight and compact as the Mavic Mini, of course, but still, compared to a Mavic 2 Pro or Zoom, or a Phantom especially, it really fits nicely down into a backpack. The case they send with the Fly More combo pack is really nice because you can fit everything in there, including the remote control. And it's a great little travel buddy if you're going to go somewhere and take it with you. The size to feature ratio is really great. A lot of features packed into a very small size. Now, as far as the sound of this thing goes, it's one of the quietest drones that DJI makes currently. The other thing about this little guy is it feels very substantial. It doesn't feel quite as lightweight and toy-like as the Mavic Mini. Now, I'm not saying the Mavic Mini is a toy because it's a decent little drone for what it is, but comparatively, this feels very solid and it feels like a real drone. It feels like the density of the Mavic 2 series or the original Mavic Pro, which to me makes it feel more like a real tool to take photos and video with at a fairly high level. That also gives it the ability to cut through wind and to hold its position in wind a little bit better. I've flown it in some pretty windy conditions so far, and it's done really well. The only thing I've noticed about it in the wind that has been detrimental is that you see a little bit more shake in hyperlapses when it's windy than you do when it's not windy, compared to the Mavic 2 Pro or the Mavic 2 Zoom. But overall, its ability to handle wind is just fine, just like any of the other DJI drones. And if you're just shooting regular video footage, you don't notice the wind as much because the gimbal does all the stabilization for you. It's on the hyperlapse that you notice it a bit. Now, the biggest upgrade to this drone compared to the Mavic Mini and the original Mavic Air is OcuSync 2.0. OcuSync is DJI's proprietary technology that transmits the signal from the drone back to the receiver, and I guess vice versa, which gives you very, very clear video signal as well as radio transmission over what they say is 10 kilometers. Now, of course, you shouldn't be flying it that far away in pretty much any condition for a couple of reasons, but ultimately, knowing that you're going to have a very good signal even in a very densely packed Wi-Fi area, and that's where enhanced Wi-Fi falls down, is when there's a lot of interference. OcuSync 2 does not fall down at all. It does a great job of keeping that transmission signal clear and clean, straight back to your phone, or, as we get further along, to the smart controller. But it's good to know that you're going to have a good transmission signal, be able to see what the drone sees, be able to give the drone commands, and interact with it, even if there's interference or trees or something like that in the way. So OcuSync 2 is a huge upgrade for this, and I hope it's something they use on all their drones going forward, but ultimately it's one of the big differentiators between this, the original Mavic Air, and the Mavic Mini. Now, 2 other things that are new on the Mavic Air 2 are APAS, which stands for Advanced Pilot Assistance Systems, and AirSense, which is a way for it to recognize when there are aircraft in the area, manned aircraft in the area, and warn you about them. Let's talk about APAS first. Now, the original Mavic Air had APAS, and it did a decent job when you were flying forward of seeing things in the way and kind of routing itself around them. The new APAS system, I have to say, is much improved. I've tested this on a skateboard, riding through trees, and I've tested this walking through trees in a bit of a clump of oaks around my kids' school. And in both cases, it was able to find its way through, avoid hitting any of the branches, leaves, trunks of the trees, etc., and just really keep locked on with me as I walked through or skateboarded through these areas. Now it's trying to go under this tree. It sees all those obstacles. It's going around them. Kind of doing the same thing. This time I'm facing the camera backwards so you can see what the drone's doing. It's ultimately going to get better and better, this APAS system. And for now, the one thing that it's missing is side sensors. So it could run into something if it was going sideways towards it. But if you're traveling behind something, like for instance yourself on a skateboard or in a vehicle or something like that, and there's big obstacles in the way and there's plenty of light, APAS does a great job of helping you avoid those things. Now let's talk about AirSense for a second. AirSense is a system built into the software of this drone that allows you to know when there's manned aircraft in the area. I know that where I often fly with my kids' school, there are small planes that are thousands of feet in the air and a few miles off in the distance, but they're still, you can hear them when they go over. And every time I've heard one in the past, I've always immediately tried to find it, drop my drone down, even though I'm not very high in the air anyway, and just make sure that I have situational awareness to know where that aircraft is so that there's no possibility of it getting anywhere near that aircraft. With this new AirSense system, you get a warning on your screen before you even hear the aircraft. And so you can start looking around, and as soon as you hear it, you know where it is and you know where not to fly, what areas to avoid. I really appreciate the AirSense system for safety, and I think overall it's going to help the entire drone ecosystem and community because we're going to be more aware of what's going on in the sky and be able to avoid any sort of incident, which is awesome. So the remote control for the Mavic Air 2 is a pretty significant departure from the traditional Mavic remotes that we've seen in the past. It's a bigger footprint. It has an antenna that's built into the phone holder, which is up here on top, and it actually is better designed as far as putting the phone into the holder, in my opinion. You pull this antenna up, it it has springs right there that keep tension on your phone when you put it in. Your cable is in this area in here, so it's always handy. It's easier to get out and put in the phone, and then this is actually your antenna. I like it a lot as far as its ability to hold the phone, make it very visible. It feels very grippy and good in the hand. The switch on the top has your, what they're calling normal now. Normal is what we used to call position mode, tripod mode, and sport mode, very clearly marked. You've got your dial for camera tilt, ability to start and stop your camera with this finger up here, ability to switch between your camera modes, i.e. video and stills, function buttons that you can program. Overall, just really well made. And one of my favorite things, it charges via USB-C, which I know doesn't sound like that big a deal, but USB-C is so much nicer. I can't wait till everything does this, because every so often I have a drone or something that uses one of the old USB standards, and I have to go find that type cable. USB-C is kind of becoming the dominant thing. You can't put it in upside down, it goes either way. It's faster data and faster charging and all that good stuff. So I'd say overall I really like the remote. But my hope is that I don't have to use this remote for very long, because supposedly with an upcoming firmware update, which I don't think has happened yet as of early July 2020, you'll be able to fly this thing with the smart controller. And for me, that's going to be one of the big game changers with this drone. I love the smart controller. I love the way it feels in your hand. I love the fact that you don't have to tie up your phone with it. I love how bright the screen is. I love everything about the smart controller. One other nice touch on the Mavic Air 2 is the LED on the bottom. This has, of course, bottom sensors, front sensors, and rear sensors. It does not have side sensors or top sensors, but next to the bottom sensors is this LED. Now, if you remember from the Mavic 2, if you've seen that drone, the Mavic 2 Pro and the Mavic 2 Zoom, it actually has those have two LED lights on the bottom and really get bright. This is a very bright LED, and it's great for helping it find itself position when it's going to land, also just for being able to see it in the sky at twilight or sunrise or whatever. So if you're flying this thing and you need to put a little extra light out there, it's just a matter of pushing a button on your remote, which I really like on this. So now let's talk a little bit about the camera. Now, the camera, mine currently has a ND filter on it, so it looks a little dark, but the camera looks a lot like a smaller version of the Mavic 2 Pro's camera, or a bigger version of the Osmo Pocket, actually. You could say either one. It's on a 3-axis gimbal, just like the others. This one has a 1/2-inch sensor, which is bigger than the Mavic Air, the Mavic Mini, and the original Mavic Pro, as well as I think it's actually bigger than the Mavic 2 Zoom, the sensor in it. Those are all 1/2 versus 1/2-inch, which means that you can do some pretty amazing stuff with this. It will shoot 4K 60 at its highest resolution and frame rate, and it will also do 48 megapixel pictures. And DJI includes a pack of 3 ND filters with the Fly More combo, which is great because then if it is a really bright day and you want to be able to see the clouds, putting one of these ND filters on makes a big difference in being able to actually see the clouds instead of just a sort of blown out sky. Now, one other thing that this has that I haven't really played with much is it supports the new H.265 codec. Now, if that makes sense to you, great. If it doesn't, I'll briefly explain. H.264 has been the compression codec for video files, particularly on DJI drones, for a while, and it's a pretty common standard. I believe that most of YouTube runs H.264 compressed videos. It makes the videos smaller, but still keeps a good quality. H.265 is supposed to be an improvement on that, where it can compress even more and still keep as much quality. I have not played with it much, but I imagine that that's where the world is going, so that's putting a little bit of future proofing into this drone, which I appreciate. But for me, ultimately, I haven't really saw the need to change from H.264 to H.265, but know that this has it. So a couple of other things that are included with this drone are quick shots and tracking. This drone, as I said before, with APAS is able to avoid obstacles very well. You combine that with the tracking that it can do, and it does a great job of following you and avoiding obstacles as it's doing so, so you don't have to worry quite as much about running into something like tree branches as you're being tracked. Now, of course, the quick shots are all in here too. You've got your asteroid, and you've got your droney, and you've got your rocket, and you've got your helix, and all those good things, which are all fantastic things to use. We've seen most of that before, but this drone does them very well, and I feel like they're a nice feature to include in this drone because they're all so easy to do and generally come out with very impressive looking footage. And as I said before, this drone does do hyperlapses, which I think is one of my favorite ways to capture a very cool scenic vista of an entire landscape with clouds going by or cars going by or whatever's happening. There has to be action in the shot for it to look really cool. If you do it on a day with no clouds and no cars going by, it just kind of looks like a weird fast shot. But if you have stuff moving through the shot, people walking by, people biking by, it makes a very cool shot. I did notice, as I said before, the couple of times I did hyperlapse on windy days, that the wind did kind of make the hyperlapse look a little shakier than I was used to with the Mavic 2 Pro and Mavic 2 Zoom, but I would say on a non-windy day it does just fine. I've got some examples, and you can see that when there's not a lot of wind, it is a very smooth shot, but sometimes with a little bit of wind it does shake around a little bit. But overall, for hyperlapses, you're just gonna have to pick a day that works really well, a day with some clouds in the sky, a day with some action going on the ground, and you can make some really cool cinematic looking pieces for your videos. So in terms of drawbacks for this thing, I'm gonna just point out two that are pretty minor. One is the fact that it doesn't have a 1-inch sensor. Now, you're not paying for a 1-inch sensor at that price, right? You're paying for a 1/2-inch sensor, which is better than most drones. But if you're a serious videographer or photographer, you're really gonna want a bigger sensor. And so going to a Mavic 2 Pro or a Phantom 4 Pro V2 is gonna be an obvious choice, because that 1-inch sensor gets you a lot better performance in low light and gets you better image quality overall. But a 1/2-inch sensor is not bad, so I'm gonna say that for the level of drone that it is, It's pretty good. It's just not a 1-inch sensor. So that's something to consider if you're going to buy a drone. If you're going to do professional photography and videography, you might look at a bigger sensor. And then number 2 is the app, the DJI Fly App. It's just not quite as robust as DJI Go 4. It's dumbed down, so to speak, so that you can find things easier, so that people who aren't as experienced with drones can go in and make adjustments more easily, which is good and bad because it takes care of a lot of stuff for you. But on the flip side, it doesn't give you quite as much control as you might be used to if you've flown other drones before. That's really all I have in terms of the downside. I am very impressed with it for the price and feel like if you're just starting out and you need a drone, you should consider this one or perhaps the Mavic Mini, depending on what you want to do with it. If all those things I mentioned to you during this video, like tracking and hyperlapse and the bigger sensor and a little more beefy airframe and the light on bottom and such are important, then this would be the way to go. I'm going to do a full comparison with the Mavic Mini on this, so you'll want to check that out because I think it is interesting to see who each one is better for. But if you're buying your first drone and you have the budget to spend on this, I'd say you won't regret buying this drone as your first drone. But if you're upgrading from a Mavic Mini or upgrading from a original Mavic Air, it's definitely worth it. Or if you don't have a drone at all, this is a great starter drone. If you like this video, I hope you'll consider subscribing to Ready Set Drone, and please comment below on what you think about the Mavic Air 2. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.